Now, obviously we started off talking about some very negative stuff with ISIS and you've touched on this a little bit already, but I want to make sure we hit this hard enough, and that is for people to live a better life, to live a life that they're proud of, to live a life that that when they die, they don't regret the life that they lived. And for me, I mean, I tell people discipline equals freedom, that the hard work, the doing the right thing. I tell people to write down what you're supposed to do the next day before you go to bed, and then you wake up and you do the things that you're supposed to do. The things that you said you were supposed to do, the things that you actually know are going to make you healthier and faster and smarter and stronger and make you more money and move you forward and help your family. You just write those things down and then you go do them. And that's essentially, you've drawn that out on a large scale and you've described this somewhat with the experiment that you did with people writing down what they're supposed to do, not just tomorrow, but with their life. That's the future authoring program. Yeah. And that's really been immensely beneficial for people.
It certainly seems to have been. It's at selfauthoring.com, and we put up a discount code for your listeners. It's WILLINK. Awesome. And so they can get 20% off it. And the system allows you to write an autobiography and to analyze your personality flaws and virtues and to write a future plan. And you can do all of those or one of them. But yeah, it's extremely useful because one of the things you can be virtually certain of in life is that you don't get something you don't aim at. And one of the things that's interesting about that is often people will keep their goals fuzzy. Because one of the problems with specifying your goals is you specify your failures, right? If the goal is really fuzzy, you're not sure when you fail, and then you can fool yourself. Really, but you can kind of keep it foggy. But you make your goals sharp and clear. Then, first of all, then you know what to aim at. And what's interesting is, your brain is set up so that it reorganizes the world around your aims. And that's not, I've also written about this in 12 Rules for Life quite extensively, and that's not a metaphor. Like, we don't see much of the world because there's a lot of the world and there isn't much of us. And so we see what we aim at. We aim with our eyes. And here's an example. So, like, great apes don't really have much of a white in their eyes, but human beings do. And the reason for that is that we've evolved to detect where everyone else is looking. And so if I can't tell where you're looking, I don't know what you're up to. And then, over time, that means I can't read you as well, and we're more likely to get in a dispute, and one or the other of us is more likely to get killed. But it also means that your probability of finding a successful mate decreases. So we've evolved to have this very, very visually evident eye. And so when we're looking at each other, we're always looking at our eyes, because then we can tell where someone is pointed, and then we can tell what they're up to. And so we're hunting creatures, like we're aiming at a moving target and trying to track it all the time. And so you have to specify your aim. And the Future Authoring Program helps people specify their aim. And it's more than one aim. It's like you have a highest aim, which you might say is to be a good person. And then I would say, there's a more elaborated aim than that. It's like you want to be able to constrain malevolence and work to decrease suffering. It's something like that. That's the highest aim. And then you have to decompose that into the things you do each day so that there's a definite connection between all the micro actions and the macro aim. And then that gives dignity to what you're doing. So if you're at home with your kids, what are you trying to do? Well, you're trying to raise them to be the kind of moral agents that will work to constrain the evil in the world and to reduce suffering. And so that's what you're doing when you're changing a diaper, if you're doing it carefully and with some respect and some love. Like, it's a major league deal to be doing that. And God only knows who your kid's going to be. He could be the kid that shoots up Columbine, or it could be Stalin. That wouldn't be so good. Or he could be someone, or she could be someone who is a positive benefit to the world, and so every child is a whole new realm of possibilities. And so there's dignity in that if you understand that. So the Future Authoring Program anyways helps people lay out a plan. And I always suggest to people that they do it badly, because You're not going to do it perfectly. And if you get perfectionistic, it's going to stop you. You know, when you first start to plan, you're probably only going to be about 20% right. But the difference between 0 and 20% is immense. And we found with our research that even people who only spend an hour on it benefit substantially in their ability to stick to what their next plan is. And you mentioned something earlier too, just a bit ago. Oh yes, about scheduling. Yeah, so one of the things I tell people, so you say write down what you're going to do the next day before you go to bed. That's good, because then you've got a direction set when you wake up in the morning. Okay? But I've told people to learn to use a schedule. And people often hate schedules because they act as their own tyrants, right? They say, well, you have to do this unpleasant thing, and then here's another unpleasant thing you have to do, and then you have to do this unpleasant thing. And you do that for about 3 days, and you think, to hell with this, I'm not doing that, and you fall off the wagon. That isn't what you're supposed to do with a schedule. You're supposed to use it to design the days that you would like to have if you were taking care of yourself. And so some of that is, you wake up in the morning and you think, here's 5 things I have to do that if I don't do, my life will be worse. It's like paying bills, for example, or taking out the garbage. It's like you have to do those because otherwise things degenerate. So you got to put some of those in the schedule, because otherwise tomorrow is worse than today, and that's a bad trajectory. But you also want to build in things, you've got to act in some sense like you're dealing with a relatively recalcitrant 9-year-old. It's like, here's some things you have to do, but here's some things that if you do, you could reward yourself with. And if you get the balance there between obligation and reward right, then you'll find that you're motivated to do the things. And that's what you want to do. You want to do that so it's sustainable across days and weeks and months. And so you got to treat yourself like a good boss would treat a valued employee, and not like a tyrant would treat a slave, because the slave will rebel. And, people say, well, I don't follow through on my plans. It's like, well, they're probably not very well formulated. And maybe you're doing them because of an external moral obligation or something. They're not really your plans, right? And B, you're acting like a tyrant and a slave. And that's a bad relationship to have with yourself. So you want to treat yourself with the same way. That's the golden rule, right? Treat yourself as you would treat other people as you would have them, treat other people as you would like to be treated. It works both ways. You also treat yourself like you treat other people properly. So that's a necessary thing, and often people don't do that. But the scheduling is really important.
Actually, when I tell people, because when I first started talking about this, people would start scheduling their day and they would just go, minute by minute. Yeah. Everything would be scheduled. And you can't maintain that for multiple reasons. Number one is no one wants to have a day like that where everything that you do throughout the day, minute to minute, sucks. It's things that you don't want to do. So guess what? After 3 days, you say, I'm not doing this anymore. It sucks. It's not fun. And so... And the same thing with the task list, people would push those off if they're not on the schedule. So I'd say put it on the schedule. But then the thing I ended up telling people is you need to number one, schedule empty space in there, because things are going to take longer, and then you're going to be off schedule, and then you'll be frustrated. So you schedule that things are going to be just empty. You're not going to do anything for this hour before lunch. You don't schedule anything. You're not going to do anything. You're not going to do anything there. And the other thing is you schedule things that you actually want to do in there, and then you go and execute the things that you want to do. You want to work out every day. You know you should. Well, maybe if it's something you enjoy, then you schedule it in there. If you enjoy picking your kids up from school on Tuesdays and Thursdays, because that's when they do their running club, then you schedule that in there so you can go and do that thing that you want to do. So you don't just schedule the things that suck. You schedule the good things too. And discipline equals freedom. I say this all the time. If you want to have more free time, which is what people want, then you need to have more disciplined time management. You will end up with more free time. I promise you. I promise you will. The other thing I was thinking about, and I just kind of occurred to me now, is people always tell people, come up with a goal and write it down, and then you're going to get there. And I was, as you were talking about future authoring, what you had said earlier when you were describing the program in its infancy, what became future authoring, is I was saying, well, how do you get people to actually do this? Well, what you've embedded in the program is the fear of what happens if you don't do these things and where you're going to end up. And people forget that. People forget where they end up if they don't do what they're supposed to do in life. And I've explained this to my kids, that when you look around and you see people that are doing things which are self-evidently not desirable things to be doing in life, whether you're a bum or whether you're doing I was a dishwasher as well, and I have an interesting story about that, and I'll tell that at some point, about a Scottish girl named Rosalind. She was older than me. I was 13, and after several weeks of washing dishes, and she was like maybe 17 or 18, and anyways, to make a long story short, eventually I said, hey, do you want to go to a movie or something with me? Because I'd like to go to a movie with you. And she looked at me and she said, Jocko, you have a serious mental problem. So Rosalind, I know you're out there somewhere. You broke my heart, sister. But I wash dishes, and that's a good thing for a 13-year-old to do. But when you're 18, okay, now it's a little bit, you want to have moved up to be the short order cook. And by the time you're 25, you want to be in charge of the whole kitchen. And by the time you're 30, you want to maybe run the nighttime shift. And that's a good progression, and that's good. But you don't want to be 35 and 40 years old out at the dishwashing stage. You don't want to be there. And I explain to my kids, because you can see people that are at that stage in their life. And sure, there's a chance that maybe they had some hardship that came along that hit them, and it put them in this position, and now they have to build back up again, and they're waiting for those doors of opportunity to open up, and that's okay. But a lot of times, it's because they didn't work. They didn't make good decisions. They didn't do the best job that they could. And so they end up in these positions that they shouldn't be in. And I tell my kids that those are real people that are in those positions. Like, we're going to leave this restaurant and we're going to go home and we're going to do what we do. That guy's going to be there for 5 more hours because it's 9 o'clock. He's got to clean everything when they get done. He's going to be there for 5 more hours. Then he's got to mop the floor. And you know what he's doing tomorrow? The same thing. You know what he's doing the night after that? The same thing. It's a real person. And I hope it's a 14-year-old. I hope it's a 16-year-old. I hope it's even an 18-year-old. But I hope it's not a 48-year-old. But there are 48-year-olds that end up in that position. And what you do in this program is you explain that you can end up there. And actually, being a 48-year-old dishwasher is actually pretty positive to where some people can end up.
Definitely.
Which is addicted to drugs, addicted to alcohol, or whatever.
Well, and everybody kind of has a sense of where they would end up if they let things auger down.